Hello, Meoni here, welcome back to another video. In patch 7.5, the Dusk Vigil duty and the Shisui of the Violet Tides were added to the duty support feature, a way of queuing directly solo into those duties with a group of AI NPCs to complete them on your own. With that, however, the Dusk Vigil and the Shisui of the Violet Tides were changed permanently even outside of that duty support feature, and those dungeons are forever changed. Unfortunately, I don't have any prior before footage to go off of, but we can talk about the changes regardless, and there are some significant ones as well as some subtle ones. Talking first then about Dusk Vigil, let's begin. The first improvement that you'll notice is that all the previously unmarked tank buster attacks throughout the entire duty now have proper tank buster indicators, bringing the dungeon more in line with modern encounter design and making it much clearer for new tanks where they should be using their mitigation. The first boss then, Oliphant, which is a big stompy mammoth, has also received a couple of mechanical updates. Before using Route, the boss will now return to the center of the arena, making this mechanic much more predictable. More importantly though, Route itself has been completely redesigned. Previously, as far as I know, the attack was an unmarked line stack AoE that required players to group together and share that damage. In 7.5 though, they changed it to simply be a line AoE that should be avoided, making the intended solution much more obvious to first-time players, but obviously changing that mechanic completely. Later in the dungeon, for the second boss, we've got Sir Eulemeric's smaller circular attack that's also been changed into a properly marked tank buster, once again making it much clearer who the intended target of that is. There doesn't seem to be any other significant changes to that boss. And then finally on the last boss, Ophinicus, there are several additional quality of life improvements. Freefall, for example, now has a proper telegraph on the player it's marking, making it much easier to identify where the attack is about to land and that player to move away from other people. The boss will now also return to the center of the arena before both Freefall and Whirling Jail, making the flow of the encounter much more consistent and more noticeable of a phase change. Another change that surprised me is that Ophinicus now only destroys the rubble that you use to hide behind when he uses Winds of Winter, so only Winds of Winter will destroy those hiding places, and is very easily put a simplification of the fight. Outside of those updates, the dungeon is largely unchanged in terms of its layout and plan. You'll still need to collect all of the levers to open all of the doors and all the keys throughout the instance, so there hasn't been any streamlining changes to the dungeon's progression itself, but the bosses unfortunately have been affected by these changes. Secondly, we talk about the Shisui of the Violet Tides. The biggest improvement actually is immediately obvious. The dungeon has finally received Dawntrail's updated lighting model, and it honestly looks fantastic. The new lighting completely transforms the atmosphere, especially in the latter half of the dungeon where the water-dappled lighting effects really stand out. You know, this place is underwater and it gives you a better vibe of that now with light shafts and god rays. If you're someone who enjoys taking screenshots in Explorer mode, this dungeon has been an even better location for that. The first boss has received a small gameplay adjustment. The ad that spawns will no longer leave behind water puddles if it isn't defeated quickly. Prior to this, if you left the ad wandering around, you had these AoE puddles to avoid. Now it doesn't even do that, so that removes even more necessity to actually focus the ad quicker because you can just walk around freely. There's less AoEs. Additionally, for some reason they have basically no HP. I don't really understand what happened here. Obviously this is a synchronized run with the NPCs here, but the Kamakiri, I didn't even touch it. The NPC Marauder basically one-shot the ad, which is really unusual. I'm not sure if it's supposed to, be that quick, but even if I wanted to show you it living more than 4 seconds in this mode, I don't think I could. It just gets absolutely annihilated in every situation, so don't really understand the purpose of still having an ad if it has no HP, but that's just my opinion. The second boss, the Ruby Princess, has several updates added as well. The chase indicator has been modernized, making it much clearer which player is being targeted. And then we've also got both Seduce and Abyssal Volcano now have noticeably longer cast times, giving players around 7 business days to recognize and react before that mechanic resolves. And as usual, the Seduce mechanic is exactly the same. You still have the boxes. Once Seduce is being cast, you go into the box to turn into an old debuff, and then that avoids avoids you being seduced and pulled into the center to get hit by the AoE, but you have even longer to do it, so there's less panic, I guess, to go and rush to a box, which is, I think, still a simplification of the fight, personally, but at least they didn't take away the big perk, which is the old debuff. It's hilarious, and it would have been a real shame if they had taken that away. Outside of that, the biggest layout change to the duty comes after defeating the Ruby Princess, the second boss. That small swimming pool section has been completely removed, replaced instead with solid walkways and bridges. This was almost certainly done to better support the AI duty support NPCs, as NPCs, as far as I know, don't handle swimming sections particularly well. Not that we've seen that very often. And yeah, unfortunately, that means a little swimming pool, if you like that, completely gone. I disagree with this change personally, because I think that the creativity that was originally on display in the duty, the flow of the duty was interesting. There was something a little bit different. I prefer little distractions, even if they are small pools of water. It's something different other than corridor leading into corridor leading into corridor between three bosses. I think this does take away a little bit creatively from the original intention, and it kind of sucks that this is applied to all variants of the Shisui of the Violet Tides. I think some people might go, Meoni, why are you bothered about it? It's just a small pool of water. I think it's less about the water and more my opinion is I disagree with it, because it's a suppression of that creativity that originally allowed for something different than just a flat path leading towards a boss. And I think it stifles creativity, just for the payoff of you having the ability to have an easier time with AI. But at the same time, you can look at some of the adventurous squadrons and the AI there that was used that would simply teleport to your location if they got lost. I don't understand why we needed to have that drop off and the water section removed, but that's just my opinion. You might disagree. It is still a minor part of the duty, but a part of the duty that has been changed nonetheless. Aside from that, I don't believe the last boss or any of the packs or anything else was changed within the Shisui at all. Overall, these aren't massive dungeon redesigns. They're a mix of a nice collection of quality of life improvements, like the tank buster markers that help bring these older duties closer to modern Final Fantasy XIV standards. But I still do feel that the oversimplification of bosses earlier in the game does actually stifle creativity and make a much weaker product compared to my experiences with a lot of these duties. A prime example of that would be to look at Desmond Darkhold, where the Eye of the Beholder boss was completely changed to not even have any mechanics. There was no purple stuff to stand on. It was just an eye boss that now melts. We've had stuff in Aurum Vale with coin counter and obviously with the Maw Ball. And on one hand, I completely understand how certain things need to be brought up to modern Final Fantasy XIV standards, but I don't think it is necessarily worth it if you sacrifice a good portion of the soul of what made these duties unique and an interesting experience to begin with, because a lot of new players will go through this and think, it was an average duty, and they certainly won't have the same memory of a place that we did when we played through this the first time. Let me know what you think about these changes, but that's all I could find. Let me know if I've missed anything from any of the Shisui or Dusk Vigil changes, and I'll see you all next time. Hopefully the future is more creative than what is on show here. Much love. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.